Hello everyone, welcome to the Morbid Monologue. Today we're talking about one of America's most infamous crimes and debates, the murder of Andrew and Abby Borden, and whether Lizzie Borden was the one who killed them. This episode was suggested by viewer Benevolent Witch. Thank you for suggesting her. I really enjoyed looking into this case. It's a case that's been highly debated since the murders took place in 1892 and isn't likely to ever be solved, so we're going to talk about it. Feel free to continue the discussion in the comments. I'm excited to hear if you guys think Lizzie Borden is innocent or guilty. Lizzie Borden has become sort of an iconic female murderer in American culture due to the deaths of her father and stepmother in the 1800s. However, what a lot of people don't know is although Lizzie Borden did stand trial for those deaths, she was actually acquitted. So saying that she for sure killed people isn't exactly fair. But in order to tell the full story, we need to start at the very beginning of Lizzie's life. She was born in Massachusetts on July 19, 1860. Her parents were Andrew and Sarah Borden. She also had a sister, Emma, who was 8 years older than her. When Lizzie was only 3 years old, her mother passed away from uterine congestion and spinal disease, leaving Emma the responsibility to take care of Lizzie. The Borden family had a lot of money. Andrew Borden was a successful businessman who earned his wealth by manufacturing and selling furniture and caskets, along with being a property developer and owning several textile mills and commercial properties. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at $300,000, which is the equivalent of $7.6 million today. And none of that was handed to him either. He didn't come from a wealthy family. Well, his cousins were wealthy, but they didn't share any of their money with him. He earned it all with determination and hard work, which in my opinion is why it's said he was a very frugal man. He worked hard for every dollar he had and didn't want to waste it on frivolous and lavish things. Meanwhile, Lizzie and Emma dreamed of living in the wealthiest part of town on the Hill, as it was called, with other people of their status, rather than their more modest home, which, by the way, was still in an affluent area just within walking distance to the properties and stores that Andrew managed. A lot of versions of this story tend to paint the picture that the Bordens were living in squalor while Andrew sat on a fortune, but although the house was certainly below their means, it was still a nice house. Emma and Lizzie were well dressed, they had plenty of food, and were even given allowances, so they were just fine. The Borden house is located at 232nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, and is actually still there today as a bed and breakfast. Apparently you can rent a room or the entire house for the night, and they allow paranormal investigations. They also provide day and nighttime tours if you don't want to stay. I wouldn't mind visiting the house, but I'm kind of conflicted on how I feel about it, but that's a whole nother topic. When Lizzie was 5, her father remarried to a woman named Abby Gray, and Emma and Lizzie were very cold to her right away. They made it clear they did not like her, and they did not think of her as their mother. Back then, it would have been appropriate and expected that the children would have referred to Abby as mother, and it sounds like Lizzie did call her mother for some period of time, but eventually she started calling her Mrs. Borden, and Emma would just call her Abby, which was really disrespectful. And Lizzie always made a point to correct people that referred to Abby as her mother, reminding them she was only her stepmother. Now, there are a few versions of the story that claim it was actually Abby that was mean to the girls and kind of the wicked stepmother situation, but there are also accounts stating she was really nice to the children. Personally, I think Abby probably wasn't as mean as she's sometimes depicted in the stories, especially when you learn the Bordens had a maid named Bridget who Lizzie and Emma called Maggie, which was the name of their previous maid, because they couldn't be bothered to learn her name. Classy. Later, tensions rose more when Andrew purchased a house for Abby's sister to keep her from going homeless. Lizzie and Emma were furious and stated that their father should be buying them a house. Lizzie's resentment grew larger towards Abby, and in order to keep the peace, Andrew gave Lizzie and Emma the house that they were born in, which they didn't move into, but they did rent it out to other people and then were able to keep the money that they made from that. As a young adult, Lizzie was very active in the church community and was even a teacher for the Sunday school. which is an interesting contrast to the fact that she was also a klepto. Apparently, she kept stealing from the local shops to the point where her father would tell the owners to just put whatever she took on the tab and he would take care of it later. I think part of this comes from her being a bit bored. She wasn't married, she lived at home with her parents and didn't work, so there wasn't much for her to do. And this isn't the only instance of theft surrounding Lizzie. Around a year before the murders, the Borden home had been broken into. The alleged burglary took place in the middle of the day in broad daylight, while Emma, Lizzie, and Bridget were all home. However, none of them heard or witnessed anything. The only items stolen were from Andrew and Abby's room. Those items were $80 in cash, $30 in gold, and Abby's gold watch and chain that was given to her by her family. Really kind of seems like it was Lizzie. So I'm really getting a sense of entitlement from Lizzie. She doesn't work, thinks she should be living with the wealthiest families on the hill, steals what she wants from stores, possibly steals from her own parents, and demands her father give her and her sister a house. And a couple months before the murders took place, things were made even worse within the household when Andrew Borden took it upon himself to kill the pigeons in the barn that Lizzie had been feeding and considered her pets, and even had Bridget pluck and clean them to be made into a stew. Apparently, Lizzie was a huge animal lover and would feed the pigeons and stray cats in the area, so this was a big deal. The days leading up to the murders, the Borden household got really sick. There's a lot of speculation on what caused the illness and who all got sick from it. It could have been spoiled mutton that was prepared for a meal, fish, spoiled milk, but during this time, Lizzie was attempting to purchase prussic acid from the local pharmacy, which is also known as cyanide. She claims she needed it to clean her sealskin capes, but the pharmacist refused to sell it to her without a prescription. It makes me wonder if she was trying to poison her parents first, but failed, so went with plan B. However, I think it's most likely a coincidence because everyone seemed to get sick, and I don't think she would have tried to kill everyone and then later decide to only kill Andrew and Abby. Side note, Emma was out of town during this time, so she didn't get sick. The night before the murders, Lizzie's maternal uncle, John Morris, pays the family a visit. He was still in contact with Andrew and the family over the years, and sometimes would stay with them while he took care of some errands in town. The morning of the murders, John states he woke up around 6 a.m. and had breakfast with Andrew and Abby around 7 a.m. Around 8:45, John leaves the house to tend to some errands and visit his niece. Andrew Borden locks the front door behind John as he leaves, and witnesses confirm John's whereabouts. Emma was still out of town on this day as well. Bridget had woken up around 6:30 that morning and was still feeling really sick, and around 9 a.m. was told by Abby to clean all of the windows of the house, inside and out. That was the last time Bridget saw Abby. This is also around the time that Andrew leaves the home as well, and Abby goes upstairs to clean the guest room. While Bridget is cleaning the windows outside, she doesn't see anyone go into the house or anyone around the house and doesn't hear anything. She makes her way back into the house through the back door to clean the interior windows and makes sure to lock the door behind her. Once she starts, she hears Andrew Borden trying to enter the house through the front door, but all the locks were latched instead of just the one for the key he had, so he couldn't get in. As Bridget is struggling to get the door open for him, she hears Lizzie laughing at her from the top of the stairs. She does eventually get the door unlocked and Andrew comes in. Andrew had come home earlier than usual because he was also still feeling really sick. Lizzie tells her father that Abby left the house to help a sick friend, and Andrew decides to rest on the sofa. Bridget finishes cleaning the remaining windows inside the house while Lizzie appears to be ironing. Bridget goes upstairs to rest in her room, and as she lies down, she hears the town clock strike 11. She was only in her room for about 10 to 15 minutes before she heard Lizzie scream up to her to come quick, someone's come in and killed father. Bridget runs downstairs and Lizzie tells her to go and quickly find a doctor. Bridget runs across the street to Dr. Bowen, but he isn't home. Eventually, a neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, sends help to locate Dr. Bowen and bring him to the Borden's house. But before the doctor arrives, Lizzie begins to express concerns that maybe her stepmother returned home at some point and someone should go upstairs and check on her to make sure she isn't there. Oh no, what if Abby came home? Bridget and Mrs. Churchill reluctantly begin to go upstairs, and as their eyes become level with the landing, they can see Abby's body lying face down in the guest room. Now, this is something that really confused me when I was looking into this case. If Bridget was originally upstairs resting and came downstairs when Lizzie calls for her about her father being murdered, wouldn't she see Abby if her body was visible from the stairs? Well, it turns out after pulling out the blueprints online, you can see there are 2 different sets of stairs in the home. One set is in the front of the home and the other is next to the kitchen. It was common back then for the maids or servants to use the stairs in the back of the house to stay out of sight of the family. Plus, it was usually in or next to the kitchen, which is where their chores would be anyway, so it was more convenient as well. So she was probably using the stairs next to the kitchen and therefore wouldn't have seen Abby's body. But that also means that Lizzie would have been in sight of the body when she was laughing at Bridget trying to open the front door earlier. Now, I'm about to show you some crime scene photos. In my opinion, they aren't super gross, but if you don't want to see them, now's a good time to look away. Dr. Bowen observed that Andrew was slumped on the sofa in the downstairs sitting room. He had suffered around 10 to 11 blows to the face. His wounds were still bleeding, and although he no longer had a pulse, he was still warm to the touch. Abby, however, was struck around 19 times and had been dead for much longer as her blood was starting to dry and coagulate. Okay, you can look again. I was actually really surprised to learn that there are crime scene photos for this case. But after looking into it, forensic photography was actually pretty common by this time. Investigators determined Mr. Borden's death occurred around 11 a.m., and Mrs. Borden was likely around an hour before that. As Bridget, the neighbor, and the doctor are asking Lizzie what happened, where was she when this happened, she tells them she was in the barn looking for iron. She heard her father groan and went back into the house, noticing the back door was wide open. However, when police question her, her statements are often contradictory and strange, and she told them she hadn't heard a groan, but just happened to go back into the house and find her father's body. Officers reported that Lizzie seemed too calm for the situation. And everyone acts differently when they're in shock, but things are kind of starting to add up against Lizzie. In the basement, police found multiple axes and hatchets, but the weapon they focused on was a hatchet head with a broken handle. They focused on this because the head had been broken off of the handle and appeared to be a fresh break, like it just happened. There also appeared to be ash on the blade and seemed like it was done on purpose to make it look as if it had been stored over a long period of time. But for some reason, none of the axes or hatchets were removed from the house at this time. Honestly, this entire investigation was botched in my opinion. The crime scene was immediately contaminated by so many people walking through the area. They didn't make people leave. Potential murder weapons weren't secured. And although Lizzie didn't appear to have blood on her, the police didn't search her thoroughly for bloodstains. They then waited days to go back and do a more thorough search of the home, and then at that point they confiscated the hatchet head. At one point, Lizzie's friend Alice witnessed Lizzie tearing up a dress to be burned. She said it had been stained with paint, and it isn't clear if it was the same dress that had been worn the day of the murders. During Lizzie's inquest hearing, she had been prescribed morphine to calm her nerves. Apparently back then, it was very common for people to take morphine for everything, and doses would be way more than what patients would take today. And it's possible it had a negative effect on Lizzie because she was erratic and would refuse to answer some questions even if the answers would be beneficial to her. She would also contradict herself and told several different versions of what she was doing at the time of the murders. saying she was in the kitchen reading a magazine when Mr. Borden came home, but then changing and saying she was ironing or that she was coming down the stairs. She also gave a statement that she took Andrew's shoes off as he lied down to rest, but crime scene photos clearly show his shoes were still on. On June 5th, 1893, the official trial began. One of the main subjects discussed in the trial was the hatchet head discovered in the basement. Prosecutors suggested that the murderer had removed the handle from the hatchet because it would have had blood on it. An officer stated he had found a handle near the hatchet at the crime scene, but then a separate officer contradicted the statement. No bloodstained clothing had been found at the home, and Lizzie's friend Alice did testify that she witnessed Lizzie burning a dress days after the murder. There are also witnesses that contradict Lizzie's account of the timeline for the morning. Bridget had left Lizzie and Andrew downstairs around 10:58 when she went to go rest. Lizzie told multiple people she went to the barn for 20 to 30 minutes. However, multiple witnesses say they saw Lizzie leaving the barn at 11:03. And at 11:10 is when Lizzie called Bridget downstairs. And I find that interesting. That only gives Lizzie 7 minutes to murder her father, clean herself up, and then compose herself enough to call for Bridget. Not impossible, but strange. During the trial, they actually presented the skulls of Andrew and Abby as evidence, and when Lizzie saw them, she fainted. On June 20th, the jury was sent to deliberate, and everyone was on the edge of their seats waiting to hear the verdict. The whole town had been following the trial, and crowds of people stood outside the courthouse waiting for any news. It only took the jury an hour and a half to come to the decision, not guilty. After the trial, Lizzie and Emma moved into the house on the hill that they had always dreamed of having. They called the home Maplecroft and had live-in maids, a housekeeper, and a coachman. Neither of the sisters ever married, and eventually they grew apart and stopped seeing each other. Although Lizzie was found not guilty, she was ostracized by the community. In June of 1927, Lizzie died of pneumonia. Upon her death, she left $30,000 to the Fall River Animal Rescue League, which is over $448,000 today. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. And $5,000 to the continued care of her father's grave. And that's the story of Lizzie Borden. This is definitely a complicated case. Personally, I think with what little evidence and information we have today, I think she probably did it. I think there's a strong motive for her to commit the crime, and she was, aside from Bridget, the only person placed at the scene when the murders took place. And I don't think Bridget did it. There's no motive or evidence pointing to her at all. Not to mention, Lizzie got exactly what she wanted out of it. She inherited her father's money, bought the house she'd always wanted, and there weren't any other reports of other people dying like this. But I do also agree with the jury's verdict, and I know that that sounds kind of crazy, but at the time, the punishment for this crime would have been death, and I don't think there's enough evidence to sentence someone to death in this case. Today we talk about there needing to be beyond reasonable doubt that someone is guilty, and there were enough doubts and inconsistencies in this case that they couldn't do that. I think that the police could have done a much better job in the investigation, and sadly, I don't think we'll ever truly know what happened because of it. But I'd love to hear what you guys think of this. Do you think Lizzie Borden is a monstrous murderer who got away with killing her father and stepmother? Or do you think she was innocent? Tell me what you think in the comments, and let me know what other morbid content you'd like me to talk about next. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Wait, bleh. Did I keep saying Bowen? The doctor didn't die. Let's go back. Gosh dang it. Got away with killing her father and stepfather? Whoa. Father and stepfather, that's a different story. In the untold story,